So there I was, watching the news conference in Helsinki. Right before my eyes, I saw our president stand beside Vladimir Putin and take Putin's word over the word of our American intelligence agencies. That is a moment of literal treason. Right before my eyes. Then I read about the Supreme Court and how it ended its spring term this year with a flurry of decisions that reinforce entrenched patterns of privilege and power. One decision granted Christians special rights. The court was offended by how Colorado officials treated the Christian beliefs of a cake shop baker, but it was and is not offended by how the president treats Muslims. Another decision granted white people special rights. Voter suppression schemes in both Ohio and Texas, proven voter suppression schemes, which target minorities, take the vote away from them. They were upheld as constitutional. A third decision of the court was to grant anti-abortionists special rights. It ruled that it violates the free speech rights of anti-abortion centers to require those centers to inform their patients about all of the options available to them, including abortion. However, the logic does not go the other way. Abortion centers must tell their clients about non-abortion related options. The bad news got worse when we learned about Justice Kennedy's impending retirement, opening the way to even more conservatives on the court and further energizing its oppressive tendencies, which include a potential future reversal of Roe versus Wade and also the right of same-sex couples to marry. All this news. And there are still children in the immigrant, or better, refugee concentration camps that have yet to be returned to their parents. It is seemingly endless. So terribly painful to witness so many of the gains of previous generations reversed, just like that, so many threatened. Even more painful is how the Make America Great Again crowd continue to cherish Trump no matter what. Brian Kemp won the GOP nomination for governor of this great state because of him, even after the treason in Helsinki. How are you explaining this to yourself? How are you doing that? Send me an email. Help me. Journalist Doug Mooter speculates in a way that I think is provocative to the point of truth. He says, what if what we're seeing is an actual schism in American Christianity? On the one side will be the genuinely Christian Christians, Christian Christianity, one that takes the words of Jesus seriously. On the other side will be a Trumpist religion that is nativist and supports all the traditional supremacies, white, male, heterosexual, and born to wealth. One side will concern itself with the poor and the victims of injustice. The other will preach a prosperity gospel in which God wants you to be rich and has his own reasons to leave the poor in the gutter. One side will promote humility. The other will glorify men of large egos who never apologize or admit their mistakes. Conservatives are fearing changes, threaten all the traditional supremacies, but their fear has become a kind of strength through Donald Trump. Donald Trump is high priest, and folks want to be born again through him. Listen to that. Born again through him. The one who practices a perverse erasure of truth and a free press. The one who fights our international friends and makes friends with our enemies. Don't you fight Canada, says this Canadian. Don't you fight Canada. For the devotees of Trump, Holy Scripture is his tweets, his sneers, the xenophobia, the gleeful misogyny, Fox News, and also all the conspiracy theories that clutter the airwaves and clutter Social media clutter our minds. Imagine the depths of the fear in America, in both the poor and the rich. The fear in their hearts, fear enough to install Donald Trump as their pastor. Enough! I had to take a break from all that toxicity. I had to take a break. All that toxicity unfolding right before my very eyes, before all of our eyes. I took a break. And these days, it's been acrylic painting. Something new in my life. Apparently, you can teach an old dog new tricks. Trying my hand at abstract expressionism. Less words, more color. Paint on the canvas, paint underneath my fingernails. Joy of painting, joy of inner images being discovered through an entirely intuitive process, not worrying at all about whether what happens on the canvas resembles anything in the real world. Images, colors that truly please my eye and make me happy. But I couldn't stay there for long. I had to go back to those other harder images of reality. Unitarian Universalist that I am, I had to go back. How to understand what is going on in our country. It was then that I remembered a quote from the great Mark Twain. He said, "You cannot depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus." It's another way of saying that the short view, the here and now view, can trap a person in a way that feels like the early onset of depression. You start thinking thoughts that in normal times would never pass muster. Despair starts to make sense. And you can't seem to think beyond it, outside of it. It is like a death shroud that you wrap tightly around yourself, and it suffocates. Whereas the not here and now view of life, it can liberate. Imagination becomes a way of seeing what is right before your eyes with a mind informed by history and by stories of that tell you of surprising possibilities no one else could have foreseen. And in the end, it was very good. I scanned my library for something that might do the trick, and I found several things that I want to share with you today. One was a book by religious scholar Stephen Prothero entitled, "Why Liberals Win the Culture Wars Even When They Lose Elections." Now, I like that title. I like that title. Whoa! Tell me some more. Here's a bit of what I learned. First, I learned that there have always been culture wars and that there have always been high priests of fear who advocate for turning the clocks back no matter what, as opposed to making more room for more people around the table, with compromises meant to smooth over differences between the states, writes Prothero. The founders created a union that left unsettled key questions that would foment discord and even rebellion in decades to come. One concerned slavery, another concerned religion. So American politics has always been a staging ground for moral and religious conflicts. The culture wars did not begin in the 1960s or 1970s when most books on the topic opened. They did not begin in the 1920s as some dissenters claim. They began in the birth pangs of the Republic itself. More than 2 centuries before Barack Obama was accused of being a covert Muslim, Thomas Jefferson was said to be a secret believer in the Quran. That is Thomas Jefferson, a Unitarian. And then there's this thing I learned, that in almost every case since the founding of the Republic, conservatives have fired the first shots in our culture wars. Equally often, the liberals have won. Prothero defines conservatism in a special way now as a kind of nostalgia for a form of life or culture that is passing away. And so you can't really get your constituency riled up about a form of life that is passing away until it is actually passing away. This is one of the main reasons why conservatives lose. The causes they select are lost causes from the start. For example, culture warriors took on Catholics when the Catholic population was mainstreaming and gaining power. They took on same-sex marriage when many gays and lesbians were already out of the closet and accepted by their heterosexual relatives and coworkers and neighbors. To me, says Prothero, Trump is the best advertisement for my book. He is the king of lost causes. In the end, the arc of our culture bends towards more liberty, not less. As each of our cultural battles come to an end, we are left with a more inclusive country with an understanding of we the people that reflects more of us. Well, that felt great to hear. And I did not read it as an inevitability. I did not. I did not take it as an excuse to jump back into my abstract expressionist painting and stay there. Lost causes are not necessarily easy to win. The NRA is a lost cause, and they are powerful. They bring it. History tells endless stories about what happened after conservatives who are nostalgic for an old repressive order fired that first shot, and how liberals had to respond with all the hard work and all the hard dogged determination that real love demands. Love is not a pushover. Love is not love that steps back when the going gets tough. Love is persistent. Love is resilient. It is daring to be powerful. And as Audre Lorde says, when I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. But the point is, we can lessen our fear. We can lessen the fear by expanding our imagination about what is happening right in front of our eyes. We can trust that what is calling us on is not a mistake. It is not a disaster waiting to happen, but that it is love. It is love. Love calling us on. Fear prevails because, says Prothero, we have short memories, because we move on. When liberals win, when, for example, anti-Mormon violence becomes a scandal, or when a gin and tonic ceases to be a scandal. Both sides come to accept the new normal, and conservatives move on to the next fight. A liberal win becomes a part of the new status quo and eventually fades from our collective memory. No conservative today wants to disenfranchise the Mormons or outlaw 5 o'clock cocktails. So these victories no longer even appear to be liberal. They are simply a part of what it means to be an American. These days, no one can afford to have a short memory. No one can afford to face what is happening right before their very eyes without an expanded imagination. And this is also so with regard to our move as a congregation. It is a time of huge feelings, which are very mixed. We are into our last worship series in this storied and beloved space, and we begin a journey that was unimaginable just a few short years ago. Next Sunday is the final worship service in this sanctuary that has been our home for 52 years. And the following Sunday, the faithful gather in a new space, our transitional space I have dubbed the treehouse, while renovations go on in our new permanent home, while they commence and go on. It is like Aeneas Nin, the writer, the beautiful writer, once said, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. That day has come. That day has come to risk blossoming. But it is a risk. It triggers fear. I don't even know what my desk is going to look like in the temporary space, in the treehouse. I'm hearing scary things about, I don't know, milk crates. It triggers fear. Although there is no question we must move physically, fear can cause us to remain tight in the bud in our hearts. We can step back rather than stepping forward. And many people have done so. And I just have compassion for that. I just do. This space has been a mandala for us. It has been a mandala for us, a focuser of spiritual passion, a design in concrete of a circle inside a square, which was always meant to telegraph our Unitarian Universalist mission of asking the biggest basic questions there are, of searching and finding the truth that sets us free, and of putting that truth to work in acts of love and justice, service and justice. We have been so very fortunate for our mandala in concrete. And so we grieve. And the grief is only exacerbated by a larger world that feels like it is on fire. But here we are. And again, an enriched imagination will serve us very well in this time. It will serve us very well to know that this congregation has endured all sorts of shocks in its 134-year history, including 5 moves. Before this congregation could move here back in 1966, did you know that it resided in temporary space for 4 years? How many of you were a part of that? Is anybody here who was a part of that? 4 years temporary space. We are stronger than we know. Can you guys attest to that? Can you give me an amen? We are stronger than we know. But still, what is happening right before our eyes is shocking. It is upsetting. It is disorienting. The urgency and the confusion of now. So I want to offer up another imagination-expanding story, which is also true. We believe in truth in this congregation. That was sort of a joke, but also very The story takes us back to a time after the Civil War in a South that was ravaged by Reconstruction policies that wreaked havoc upon an already weakened and fragile economy. All that the poor farmers planted was cotton. But cotton drained the soil of its valuable nutrients, valuable minerals, and yet they still planted cotton because that was all that they knew. It was a vicious cycle, seemingly without end. And then the boll weevil came. The cotton farmer's worst nightmare. Could you turn that light down? You got to see the ugliness of that thing. Whoa! Please turn that light down. Yes. And you can keep those lights down for the rest of the pictures. Boo! Whoa! Join me, because it feels good. Boo! Whoa! That insect is a native of Mexico, and in 1892 started to emigrate northwards into Texas and Alabama and Virginia and all the other southern states. Each spring, Adults emerge from hibernation to lay eggs within the cotton bolls, the tissues that eventually give rise to the plant's valuable fibers. As the eggs develop, they destroy the crops literally from the inside out. It meant that the vicious cycle of planting cotton was ended. The boll weevils threatened to bring utter and permanent destruction. USDA officials at the time called the invasion a wave of evil. Newspapers predicted the end of the Southern way of life. Into this picture came a man whose imagination was larger than the suffering he saw right before his very eyes. George Washington Carver. From his very youth, he had been interested in plants and earned the epithet the plant doctor as a young boy when he was helping his neighbors with their gardens and with their crops. He was the one. His science was the science that recommended crop rotation as a way to return nutrients back to the soil. Don't just plant one kind of crop over and over again. Change things up, especially plant peanuts. Writer Emily Glazer shares some of the rest of this story. The poor farmers Carver so desperately wanted to help latched onto this idea of crop rotation and quickly began alternating their cotton crops with their peanut crops. The results were impeccable. Farmers were delighted with the profundity of peanuts and cotton, but the newfound fertility of the lands brought its own kind of complication. What to do with all those peanuts? Carver returned to the lab once more to help his apprentices. He emerged in 1916 with his book, How to Grow the Peanut and 105 Ways of Preparing It for Human Consumption. Carver discovered over 300 uses for the simple nut, including ink, coffee, axle grease, bleach, shaving cream, and wood stain. Needless to say, farmers quickly found a use for all those peanuts. The cotton mills across the South were easily converted to peanut oil mills. Farmers also began feeding their livestock with the plants of the nut and feeding their families with the product that they couldn't sell. With his hundreds of discoveries, Carver furthered the movement towards complete self-sufficiency for the Southern farmer. The South was saved. The South was saved. Maybe some of you personally know this story. It has touched your family. Yeah? And did you know about a certain statue in Enterprise, Alabama, that stands at the intersection of College and Main? A slender lady in flowing white robes, a heavy object high above her head. Don't show the picture yet. I want you to think Charlton Heston in that movie, The Ten Commandments. He's holding the tablets, except Our Lady, she holds an outrageously oversized bronze boll weevil. Show those pictures. There it is. Whoa! From agricultural menace to town hero. Adversity, the worst kind, that called for new heroes and new thoughts to take the South into a new future. It is getting way ahead of myself, way ahead of things, to say that one day UUCA might erect a statue in honor of Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, whose impact on us has been decidedly boll weevil-ish. And it is way too soon to talk about erecting a statue in honor of Donald Trump. For all the ways his loss, I know it's because it's too soon, right? For all the ways his lost causes will challenge us to get more focused, more articulate, more intensive, more committed to the hard work ahead. Maybe one day. All I know is that it is love calling us on despite what is right in front of our eyes. Love calls us beyond what we think we are capable of. Love calls us on in ways that at times seem merciless and cruel. Love calls us on to the end of the world as we know it and beyond. Love is calling America on to greater inclusivity, greater community. Love is calling this spiritual community on to becoming something new. Who are the George Washington Carvers among us? Who won't stand back, but they will step forward with us, and they will astonish us with their new visions and their new vitality. Who are they among us in this place right now? Who will come and be with us? Love is about the long haul. Love is a marathon. We are embarking on a marathon journey. And love calls us.